And for more on day 2 of the elections or the voting process taking place in the US, we're now joined by SABC News Correspondent Sherwin Bryce Pease, and he joins us now via video link. Sherwin, thank you so much for your time this evening. Now, you've spent most of the day already speaking to a number of South Africans who have cast their vote at the mission and the voting station where you are at. Just tell us, how has voting day 2 been for those South Africans?
Yeah, a sense of euphoria, a sense of joy and elation certainly is the sense we get from observing this process at the South African Consulate General here in Manhattan. Let me just also confirm, Mbali, that all 3 voting stations in the United States, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. and New York here in Manhattan, are now open. Los Angeles opening at 7 a.m. Pacific time, so there's about a 9-hour difference between South Africa and the west coast of the United States. But certainly Los Angeles is underway. They've been open now for over 2 hours, and I'm told like over 100 people have showed up to vote there. More than 250 have voted in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. And of course, here in New York, we're told that they've gone through 3 voting ballot books, and there are about 100 ballots in each book. So we're above 400 now. So at a steady pace, the IEC officials based here have not had a chance really to step away from the desks. While we don't have the queues and the lines we're seeing in places like The Hague and in London at South Africa House, there's been a steady clip of people coming in here, some wearing Springbok jerseys, some wearing Proteas cricket jerseys, coming in with South African flags, and a great sense and an appreciation for the right to vote, of course, afforded to South Africans, or the majority of South Africans, only since 1994. And among the people observing the process here is Reno Geldenhuys. Reno, just step in for a moment. Reno is with the Groundwork Collective. Just explain to voters what you're doing here and what you've observed so far.
Yeah, so I'm here as an independent observer. We just wanted to make sure that the process is running smoothly. Everything started on time. So far, so good. Everyone's very excited to be here. The staff have been phenomenal. And we really are just very happy to be here and to represent and to see everybody getting very excited to cast their votes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you stepping in. Reno Geldenhuys, an independent observer. I can also tell you, Mbali, there have been some party agents, 2 from the EFF earlier we talked to, as well as a representative from the Democratic Alliance. I haven't seen any of the other parties represented here. But it's still, they will go for, I think, another 5.5 hours, 5 hours and 45 minutes for expats that are registered to vote at this polling station. So we're at about 400 plus, which means there's still about 1,100 that are eligible and registered to vote here that have not showed up. But there are still hours and hours to go. They'll be open until 9 p.m. local time. And the word from officials here is, please, if you're watching back in South Africa and you know that your friends or your colleagues or your relatives are registered in New York, send them a text message. Tell them that the voting station is open until 9 p.m. and make sure that they come down here, because this is a vote and this is a process that many people died for, that many people struggled for, and so it is incumbent on South Africans, if they have the opportunity to do so, to show up and vote.
Indeed, very important for all South Africans to play their part in these elections, Sherwin. But one thing I wanted to touch on, I know that many people back home, when they are voting, they're voting for various issues, including things like load shedding and a high unemployment rate, and of course the issues around land. What are the people in your voting station saying?
Yeah, these are people that are very engaged in the process back in South Africa. Some of the voters told us that they might be living in the United States right now, but that they plan to return to work and live in South Africa in the future. And so they're very invested in where the country goes from here. The interesting thing that I've also picked up is that New York is, this is a polling station in Manhattan, but we've had voters coming from Springfield, Illinois. That's over 1,500 kilometers from New York City. We've had people flying from the Dominican Republic, from the British Virgin Islands. So people are from Boston up the East Coast. So certainly a recognition that despite the perhaps inconvenience associated with having to travel and the expense associated with that, and given the limited number of polling stations we have in countries like the United States and around the world, people still, making an effort to get in a plane, a train, a car, to drive the distance to come and cast their ballots, and certainly a recognition of the historical nature of what it means to vote in a South African election. But people talk about corruption. People talk about the new National Health Insurance Bill that was signed into law by President Ramaphosa has a concern. People talk about load shedding. They talk about infrastructure concerns, water infrastructure, the ability of people to drive on roads that don't have major potholes. And so infrastructure is a big issue. Criminality in South Africa is also top of mind for a number of voters here. So there's certainly, the issues back home are certainly not lost on voters in the United States, and nor should it be, given how technology works these days in Bali.
Indeed, Sherwin. Of course, yesterday we saw you. We spoke to you yesterday, and you told us about that you had already cast your ballot. Maybe just tell us about the process that you undertook that is quite different from voting here in South Africa as opposed to voting abroad.
Well, I'll tell you, we didn't have to queue like they did in London or The Hague for 4 hours. That's a plus. So I can certainly assure voters that if they come down to New York, it's a very smooth running process. We're on the 10th floor of a high-rise building in Manhattan. That's where the South African Consulate General is located. You check in at the bottom. There are agents, IEC agents downstairs. They check your ID, if you have a temporary ID, a green ID book, or the smart card ID. They then verify that. You're then shipped upstairs in the elevator. You are then met at when the doors open. Your name is then taken off the voter's roll. They put a line through it. You get an ink. You get some ink, wrong thumb, ink on your thumb. And then you are given 2 envelopes. Envelope A is where you insert your ballot. You then seal that envelope. They then give you a second envelope, envelope B. The voter behind me has taken her envelope B. You insert envelope A in envelope B. On envelope B, you put your name, your ID, and your location, which is New York. You then seal that envelope. You put it into the ballot box at the end of the process. All those ballots will be secured into a courier package, which will be collected by a service provider that will then ship it securely to the IEC headquarters in Pretoria. And those ballots will only then be processed once the polling stations close in South Africa at the end of the process on the 29th of March. And that's only when votes that were cast abroad will be tabulated among the rest of the votes that will be counted at IEC headquarters in Pretoria. So a lot of voters in conversation here have been raising questions about whether it's correct to have to put their name and their ID number and their location on envelope B, but we are assured by IEC officials that envelope will be delinked from the ballot. That ballot will then be moved into a pile, and it will then be counted, tabulated, and so your vote remains a secret. Your vote will be anonymous, despite the fact that you have to put your name on envelope B.
All right, Sherwin, thank you so much for that follow-up, and of course just the voting process and how different it can be when you're living abroad. That's our SABC News correspondent, Sherwin Bryce Pease, there just giving us an update in terms of the voting process being conducted abroad.